I met Jackson when we were 7. He was the loud kid who couldn't sit still, and I was the quiet one always reading in the corner. Somehow, we balanced each other out. We'd bike around the neighborhood until the street lights blinked on, and we knew each other's secrets long before we understood what secrets even were. Time made us older, not strangers. Even through high school, when his world revolved around girls and football, and mine didn't fit into any category, he never made me feel small. That's why I never told him how I really felt. I kept the truth buried beneath years of just friends and late-night conversations where I played the role of the safe place he could always return to. Even when he cried about girls who broke his heart, I stayed silent, pretending it didn't tear me apart a little more each time. Loving Jackson had always felt like holding a flame too close, comforting and cruel. Last week, he called after months of no contact. Said he needed to get away for a night, that everything fell off lately. I told him to come over. The words left my mouth before I could ask myself if I was ready to see him again. When he walked through my door, everything inside me turned to noise. His smile was the same, warm, boyish, familiar. He dropped his backpack on the floor like nothing had changed. For him, maybe nothing had. But for me, everything had been shifting for years. We stayed up watching the same old movie we'd seen 100 times. He stretched out beside me on the couch, unbothered, laughing like the world hadn't fallen apart for either of us. I forced my heartbeat into rhythm, nodding along like I didn't feel his shoulder brushing mine, like I wasn't memorizing the way his eyes lit up when he talked. He asked me why I never moved away like I said I would. I told him I never found a good enough reason. He stared at me a second longer than usual, then turned back to the screen. I pretended I didn't notice. As the night deepened, he pulled the blanket over us like he always did back when we were kids. I didn't move. I couldn't. He lay down next to me, eyes closing without hesitation, like he trusted me in a way I'd never learned to trust myself. I watched him fall asleep, wondering if he could feel the way the air had changed, the way everything inside me had gone still and loud all at once. I didn't touch him. I didn't speak. I just lay there, counting the breaths between us, knowing one of them would break something I'd been trying to protect for years. And still, I didn't look away. He shifted beside me in the dark, mumbling something in his sleep. I stayed still, too aware of how close he was, too afraid to move and break the fragile moment holding everything together. His hand brushed mine once, maybe by accident, maybe not. I didn't dare pull away. The space between us was narrow, but the questions in my head were endless. Was it just comfort? Was it habit? Or was he searching for something, like I always had been? When he opened his eyes again, it was just past midnight. He looked at me, not startled, just quiet. Then he whispered, "You ever feel like nothing fits anymore?" I nodded, unsure of what he meant, but understanding it anyway. He kept his gaze on me, like he was waiting for something I didn't know how to give. I wanted to ask what had broken him lately, what made him call me after so long. But I was too scared of the answer. We talked in low voices, softer than the silence around us. He said he felt like he'd been pretending for too long, that nothing felt real anymore, not even the people he'd spent the most time with. I wanted to ask, and what about me? But instead I said, "You don't have to pretend here." He gave me a look I couldn't decode. Part relief, part confusion, part something else I was scared to name. He laughed suddenly, small and tired. Said I always knew what to say. I didn't respond. I just watched the way his eyes lingered on mine a second too long. Something was shifting, slowly, dangerously, not in the loud, cinematic way people describe when they fall in love. It was quieter, like a thread coming loose that couldn't be rewound. Then he told me he almost didn't come, that he was afraid things between us had changed. I asked what made him think that. He shrugged, said, "I don't know. You've been distant." I almost laughed. If only he knew how much energy it took to stay near him and pretend I was fine. I told him maybe I just didn't want to ruin anything. His expression faltered, like he felt something in those words that hit too close. He moved a little closer, not dramatically, just enough that I could feel the warmth of him again. He didn't say anything after that. Neither did I. But the silence wasn't empty. It was full of unsaid things, full of the years I spent loving him quietly, full of the uncertainty now hanging between us. He rested his head back and closed his eyes, but I could tell he wasn't asleep. I wasn't either. I just lay there, inches apart from the one person I loved most, wondering if tonight was a mistake or if it was finally the beginning of something real, something terrifying, something neither of us knew how to undo. By morning, the air felt different, heavier, slower. I hadn't slept. I'd spent the night replaying every word, every glance, every moment of closeness like it meant more than it did. When his eyes fluttered open, he looked at me like he didn't expect me to still be awake. Maybe he thought the silence would fix whatever was starting to unravel. But it didn't. It only deepened the ache I was trying to ignore. He sat up, rubbing his eyes, and let out a tired sigh. I asked if he was okay. He nodded too quickly. Then, without looking at me, he said, "Last night, it felt different." My throat tightened. I waited for him to keep going. He didn't. So I asked, "Different how?" He hesitated, chewing on the inside of his cheek like he didn't want to admit it. Finally, he said, "I don't know. Just safe. Like I didn't have to be anyone else." I told him he never had to be anyone else with me. He looked at me then. Really looked. The kind of stare that strips everything down and leaves you exposed. He said, "Why does it feel like you're always waiting for me to figure something out?" The question knocked the air out of me. I didn't answer right away. I couldn't. So he continued, "I feel like you know what this is. And I don't." My voice cracked when I said, "It's okay not to know." But we both knew it wasn't. Not really. He reached for my hand, slowly, like he was afraid I'd pull away. I didn't. I let his fingers wrap around mine and try not to let my pulse give me away. For a second, it felt like everything was suspended. History, fear, love, regret. All of it hung there between us. Then he whispered, "I don't know what I'm doing." I told him I didn't expect anything. And I didn't. But deep down, I wanted something, clarity, honesty, maybe even hope. He leaned in slightly, forehead brushing mine. Not a kiss, just a moment of stillness, close enough to feel each other breathe. It should have answered something. It didn't. It only made the confusion worse. I asked, "Are you going to pretend this didn't happen when you leave?" He pulled back slowly, eyes unreadable. "I don't know," he said again. "I didn't mean for any of this to happen. I didn't come here for this." I nodded, because I knew. I'd always known that loving him came with terms I didn't get to set. He let go of my hand, and the space between us returned, cold and unmistakable. Whatever that moment was, it was already fading, and I was already bracing myself for the part that always came next. Silence, distance, and pretending it never meant anything. Even if, for me, it meant everything. He didn't say much while packing up his things. I stood by the door, watching him move like none of it mattered, like the night hadn't cracked something wide open. He glanced at me a few times, offering small smiles that didn't quite reach his eyes. I forced one back each time, pretending I was fine, pretending I wasn't still waiting for him to say something real. When he finally zipped his bag, he asked, "You gonna be okay?" I nodded, not because I was, but because I knew he needed me to be. That's what I always did, made things easier for him, carry the weight in silence. He looked like he wanted to say more, but didn't. I didn't push. I was tired of being the only one who ever did. He stepped closer, hugged me quickly. It wasn't cold, but it wasn't the same as last night. It felt like a goodbye we weren't calling a goodbye. I wanted to ask if he meant any of it, if the hand-holding, the way he looked at me, the words he said in the dark were real. But I didn't, because I already knew the answer. He pulled away first, said, "I'll call you," but we both knew he wouldn't. Not soon, maybe not ever. The look in his eyes said he wanted to forget, not confront. I opened the door for him. He walked out without looking back. I closed it slowly, as if that would soften the sound of something ending. After he left, I sat down where he'd slept and tried to hold on to the warmth still lingering in the fabric. I thought maybe if I stayed there long enough, I could convince myself it hadn't just been another almost. Another memory that would hurt more than it helped. But the truth settled in fast. That night didn't bring us closer. It didn't give me clarity. It gave me a version of him I'd always wanted but never had, and now I knew I never would. It wasn't his fault. He never promised me anything. He never asked me to wait. But he let the lines blur, and I let my heart fill in the rest. That was the real betrayal. Not that he left, but that I let myself believe he wouldn't. That somehow, after everything, I still thought I mattered in a way he wasn't ready to admit. I stared at my phone the rest of the day, watching it not light up. And when the silence stretched too long, I stopped hoping. I didn't cry. I just felt hollow, like I'd handed over a piece of myself and didn't know how to ask for it back. Some love stories never start. They hover, waiting for the right moment that never comes. I loved him in silence for years, and when he finally saw it, even for a second, he turned away. Some people aren't meant to be loved loudly. Some are meant to be remembered quietly.